Today on Masters on the Move, we're tackling one of the biggest fears many people have as they get older, the belief that pain, stiffness, and physical decline are just part of aging. My guest says that's simply not true. Eileen Kopsaftis is a licensed physical therapist with over 30 years of experience working across acute hospitals, outpatient rehab, home care, and nursing homes. She's also an international best-selling author of Pain Culprits, Aging Culprits, and a global educator who's helped people in their 70s and beyond regain strength, mobility, and confidence, often without drugs and surgery. Eileen blends movement, science, nutrition, and real-world clinical experience to challenge what most of us have been told about pain and aging. Today, she's here to break some myths, explain what's really going on in the body, and share practical strategies you can start using right away to move better, feel stronger, and stay independent for life. Eileen, it's an absolute honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Welcome to Masters on the Move.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That introduction made me sound brilliant, but I often say that I'm really not all that brilliant. I'm just really gifted at finding brilliant people and learning what they know.
You've worked in almost every healthcare setting imaginable. What patterns did you start noticing about pain and aging that made you question the normal aging narrative?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I saw, and this was over 30 years. I mean, I saw this in every setting I was in. But I saw there was this dichotomy. There was this difference in the people I worked with. One of the things that I noticed that was very surprising to me because I was only in my 30s was I was in the acute hospital setting. And I would occasionally get a patient who was in there because of, they had a severe cold that kind of snowballed into pneumonia, and that took them out for a day or two, but they had treatment and they went back home fine to resume their life as it was prior. And so many of them were over 100 years old. And I saw that their lives were independent. They were going home to their own home. They did their own driving, cooking, shopping, cleaning, finances. They lived life large. They had quality life. And I thought, okay, this is not what I expected. In your 30s, when you think of somebody who's over 100, they're like ready to go below ground. And so how could these people have such a quality of life? And it really opened my eyes to the fact that, maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe there's something that's not being told or reported that's very different from what we do hear, that mainstream narrative all the time, that you're supposed to decline, you're supposed to end up needing disposable underwear, you're supposed to end up needing a walker, or God forbid, end up in a nursing home setting. And what I've learned, to just put it in a nutshell, is nobody ever set a goal to go to a nursing home, but it happens by default. And I learned what we can do to radically reduce our risk of that happening.
That's fantastic. Was there a moment in your career where you realized we're missing something big here?
I don't know that there was one specific moment. It really was this gradual understanding and observation over the years by looking at the different people I worked with. I mean, I saw people in their 60s who were wheelchair bound on 15 different medications. Their quality of life was just horrible. And I saw other people who were in their 90s coming into an outpatient clinic, just trying to, get this pain gone because they want to keep playing tennis or basketball. And so it was, okay, this is a big mix here. What's going on? And so I started to pay attention to the variables, the things that I saw, and I asked a lot of questions, and I learned a lot from these people.
What's the most damaging myth people believe about aging and pain?
I believe it's the mindset. It's the belief that you have to decline. It's the belief that it's inevitable, that you can't prevent it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. I think that's probably the most damaging, because we're going to live our lives and base our activities on what we believe.
Why do so many people accept pain as inevitable once they hit their 50s, 60s, or 70s?
Because they're told, "You are getting older, you know. What do you expect at your age?" And we hear this from medical professionals, from doctors, from orthopedists, from physical therapists, from athletic trainers. We hear it everywhere. And I spoke to a young man who was only 35 recently, and he said that when he turned 30, all of his friends started telling him, "It's downhill from here. You're going to start having joint pain. You're going to start." And I thought, oh my gosh, are you serious? I'm 67 and I don't have any pain. I mean, to be told that you're going to start going downhill at the age of 30. So that's what we're being fed. That's what we
Mhm.
believe. And it's very sad. And I can tell you, I have worked with countless people over 50 in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even over 100, and seen them get stronger, seen their quality of life improve, seen their pain diminish or completely resolve, depending on why it was there.
Right. You talk a lot about how interconnected the body really is. Can you explain why pain often shows up far away from its true cause?
Mm. It's because everything's connected. Now, I know the healthcare world would love to compartmentalize our body. So, if you have a cervical problem, if your neck has a problem, we don't look at your back because we're here to look at your neck. I mean, the spine is one piece of anatomy. It's not disconnected just because we've named it cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. It's one piece of anatomy. You've got muscles that go up and down the entire level as well as singular levels. So, and it's the same thing with every other body part. Everything's connected to everything else. And that old song, this bone's connected to that bone. Oh my gosh, is that so true? And when you go to just move across the room, you're using your entire body. You're not just
True.
using your knee or your shoulder or your hip. And so, why are we seen as a body part when we walk through the door? And I always tell people, if somebody only sees you as a body part, they're going to be
Mm.
limited in how much they can help you.
Right.
And I'll give just one small example because this is very important for people to know. You have certain body parts that depend on what's happening above and below. And if what's happening above and below isn't proper, those body parts are going to scream for help. And those body parts are victims. They're not the culprit, which is why I named my book Pain Culprits. And I've got chapters in there on body parts, and you can understand, because most people have a history of an ankle sprain or some issue where they weren't weight bearing on one side because of an injury, a surgery, whatever. And nobody ever checked to see, is that ankle performing properly? And if it's not, that can impact your knees. It can impact your hips, your low back, your shoulders, even your neck. So,
Right.
and if nobody understands that connection, they can treat you till the cows come home, but they're not going to resolve the problem. So, and here's just a quick example. The knees count on the ankles and the hips below and above. The
Yes.
low back, it's almost never the low back. It's almost always the hips below or the trunk above. The shoulders, it's almost never the shoulders. Everybody wants to beat up the rotator cuff. The shoulders are depending on your pelvis, your hips. Also, your ankles, especially if you're throwing or you're swinging, or in a sport of some kind. And they also count on your trunk. And your neck counts on everything below. So we have to stop seeing ourselves as a body part because we're doing a disservice.
Yes, that makes so much sense. Can you share a real client story where treating the pain spot failed, but addressing the system worked?
Oh, absolutely. So, oh my gosh, I can tell you so many stories. My very favorite one is the guy who ended up on my schedule because his therapist went on vacation. And that happened a lot in my world. And so we always got to play and have fun and do things that they were not getting. And this one person was having neck pain. And so I looked at the schedule. I looked at his notes and I saw that he'd had about 8 or 9 treatments and they had been treating his neck and no change had occurred. He reported, the pain was still there. So he was very happy when I suggested, how about if we look someplace else? And because he wanted to get rid of the pain. So
Yes.
I'm asking him, when do you have your neck pain? And he said, when he took his morning walk. And I said, okay. And he said, by the end of his walk, he had neck pain and a headache. but he loved his morning walk. He didn't want to give it up. He just wanted to get rid of the pain. So I looked at his low back, saw a little something, but I didn't think that was it. And then I asked him, have you ever sprained your ankles? Because I know that ankle function is hugely important, especially with gait. And he said, oh, countless times in college, in sports. I looked at his ankles, and there's this motion that's really required anywhere from 10 to 30 degrees. He had 0 on one side and -5 on the other. So we did a very gentle mob to improve the joint motion. And I taught him how to do a very special way to lengthen the calf muscles because they had been shortened for decades. He never had to come back.
Wow.
He said his neck pain was completely gone. He could walk all he wanted and no neck pain. Now, imagine if this man had kept getting neck pain treatment. And unfortunately, a lot of times, if you're over the age of 12, something's going to show up on imaging. So they could have imaged his neck because the pain wasn't resolving. They might have found something, and God forbid they would have treated what they found, but it wasn't the cause of the pain. His neck was the victim.
Right. Gosh, that makes so much sense and such an eye-opener. What do most conventional pain programs get wrong?
They get wrong that people are a body part. They get wrong that, and this sounds disrespectful, but I don't mean it that way. Evidence-based medicine will never be successful treating chronic pain. And the reason for that is every single person is unique like a fingerprint. I kind of say we're all like a bunch of snowflakes. And the issue is we all have a different history, a different way of feeding our bodies, maybe a trauma history, injuries, surgeries, medical conditions, personalities, jobs, what we do when we're not working. Everybody is very unique in their own life. And I can have 3 people walk into the clinic with the same exact diagnosis, the same exact symptoms, but require a completely different plan of care to resolve. So I think that's what we get wrong with, and then there's the whole thing of, and this is pain management. And I mean no disrespect to that profession because they're doing their best to help people and meet a need, but who wants to manage pain? I don't know about you. I don't want to manage pain.
No.
I don't want to manage disease. I want to get rid of it. Yeah.
That sounds really the way to go, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Why do treatments focused on scans, injections, or isolated exercises often fail long term?
Well, again, the scans, there's been over the past decade, excuse me, maybe longer, they've been publishing lots and lots of studies that scans don't line up with symptoms. In other words, things will show up on scans, and I'm talking almost anywhere in the body. We're talking herniated discs or whether the neck, the low back, meniscus in the knees, rotator cuff tears. A lot of the times, what shows up on imaging, the person is not having any symptoms.
Right.
And there are times that people have symptoms, but nothing shows up on imaging. And then, of course, there's the mix in between.
Yes.
So what that means is just because something shows up on imaging, it doesn't mean it's the cause of the problem. Like I said with that story with the man with the neck pain, he might have had something show up on imaging because he was an older man, but it wasn't the cause. So if we're determining our plan of care or our treatment based on imaging, we can completely miss the mark. And then the isolated exercises. The human body is not designed to move in isolation. And what I mean by that is a lot of the times in the movement industry and my profession are very much known for doing this. We're going to isolate a muscle and we're going to make it stronger, or we're going to stretch it, or we're going to treat it somehow. It's not how the body works. Depending on what anatomy book you look at, there's over 600 muscles, but they all work together to move the body for a specific task. And if you are working, if you're doing physical tasks or you're gardening or you're playing with your grandkids on the floor or you're doing anything that's real life, you're using your whole body every time you move. But we go into a gym setting or a PT clinic and we're told to isolate a muscle. So what you're doing is the body is scratching its head going, I can do that movement, but do you really want me to? And we're doing it against resistance repetitively. So we're really setting a person up. Now, I'm not saying people are injuring people, but a lot of times when you isolate muscles repetitively against resistance, and it's a very unrealistic or inauthentic motion, you're going to kind of strain and stress the tendons. You're going to be more prone for tendinitis, tendinosis, tendinopathy, because it's not how the body functions. And I worked with lots of people who spent an hour a day in the gym before or after work, and they had those issues because they were isolating muscles.
Mm. So, Eileen, you're certified in applied functional science. How is that different from traditional exercise and rehab?
Oh, it is night and day. So, the first 15 years of my profession, I invested heavily with time and resources to learn manual skills. And I was able to really increase my success rate at helping people. So it made me much more happy with my job because you really want that job satisfaction of making a difference, not just putting the time in. But I didn't really teach a lot of movement because it didn't make sense to me. The manual skills world focuses on finding the cause. So, like a simple example is if someone has pain lifting their arm up like this, I look to see if the sacrum is torqued because it pulls on the big muscle that goes up and holds the shoulder. And the big muscle, when it gets pulled down here, it's going to pull up here. And so you correct the torsion, very simple, easy manual techniques. And then you calm down the muscle using another technique. It's literally like 10 minutes. And then they see that they've got, oh my gosh, I can do this now. And it's not hurting. It's not pulling. And so I learned in the manual skills world that very often the cause was not where the pain was elicited. So I didn't agree with the conventional exercise training of let's work the body part that's complaining because it didn't make sense to me. As a matter of fact, I got in a little bit of a scuffle with a supervisor once because we were creating these cookie cutter exercise sheets to hand out to patients. And they were assigning body parts to all the clinicians in the clinic. And I was assigned neck. And I said, I can't do this. And they said, what do you mean you can't do this? I said, I don't give people neck exercises. What do you mean you don't give people neck exercises? Well, if it hurts to move your neck, telling them to move their neck isn't going to fix the pain.
Mm.
So it's not what I do. So they did get over it. I struggle to be intimidated when I know I'm right. And I don't mean I think I'm right all the time, but I do stand my ground when I know I'm right. And I had observed this for years of what I did. So fast forward about 15 years into my profession, I came across the Gray Institute. And it's GRAY for anybody who wants to check it out. They are the most brilliant resource for training in human movement that I have ever come across. As a matter of fact, I called them the Holy Grail of movement because it's what I had been looking for my entire profession. And I have taken pretty much every course they offer. I've taken their biggest course, which is the GIFT Gray Institute Functional Transformation course. It's 40 weeks, 5 hours a week. It can make your head hurt. It's very detailed, I look at it kind of like a PhD in human biomechanics, how the joints move.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I'm now in their Collaborate Plus, where we're going to be creating a fascia and movement course for the Gray Institute. So I just love it. But Dr. Gary Gray is the founder of the Gray Institute. His son, Doug Gray, and Dr. Dave Tiberio, they have worked together for, oh my gosh, well, Doug's not as old as that, but Dave Tiberio and Gary Gray have worked together for over 40 years. And the coursework that they offer is to movement professionals, healthcare professionals, licensed professionals. They don't really teach the lay public. And so I started teaching the average person this stuff. I work at the local community college and I teach community courses, and I've done online consulting. I've created online courses, and it's phenomenal how this works to locate the culprit and to fix the culprit. That's what's key. It doesn't, nobody cares if you figure out what's wrong if you can't fix it.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's really kind of the secret sauce to how I treat movement.
Okay, that's fantastic. We'll definitely check out that Gray Institute. Sounds
Yes.
intriguing.
Yes.
What types of movement do people over 50 really need more of, and what should they stop doing?
Mm. Well, stopping the isolating movements and trainings
Mhm.
is key. What really benefits people the most, there are three areas of the body that are typically the culprit for pretty much any place somebody might experience pain or limited mobility. I can't really do the motion as much as I'd like to. And those three areas are the ankles, the hips, and the trunk. Now, very few people train their ankles, and they don't realize just how responsible they are for so many things that might be going wrong in their movement patterns.
Mm.
And then the hips, the same thing. A lot of people, oh, it's my low back. Oh, it's my knees. Oh, it's, that they want to fix the pain that hurts, but they don't realize that you've got to fix the culprit to stop the pain. And then the trunk. The trunk is, I love this one. I'm not my coursework is not created by the Gray Institute. I have to make sure I say that. And I don't work for the Gray Institute. But Dr. Gary Gray is very well known for calling the trunk the silent saboteur, because very few people will have pain in the trunk area, but it will wreak havoc on the low back, the shoulders, the neck. And nobody trains their trunk. Not
Mm.
really. They all want a six-pack ab. They all want a strong core, but they're not really training their trunk in full mobility. And we move in three planes of motion. I don't know anybody who teaches out there training your trunk in three planes of motion. I haven't found it anywhere. Maybe I've missed it. There's millions of things we can look at. But your trunk moves in this type 1, type 2 motion, and I teach it. It's like you're rotating and side bending to the same side or the opposite side, and you've got to be able to go forward and backward when you're doing those movements. And so many people, so say you're sitting in the car and you want to back up your car, you're driving, and you turn to back up your car and you struggle to do that because it causes neck pain or back pain. Guess what? It's probably not your neck or your back. It's probably your trunk. And if you're not training your trunk, you're not going to resolve the problem. So
Right.
if you're getting up there in years, it if you're feeling pain, it has nothing to do with how many candles are on your birthday cake. It has everything to do with the fact that there are areas of your body you've not paid attention to because you didn't know you needed to, or you didn't know how. And so now you do. You want to make sure those ankles are working properly, and again, in three planes of motion. Most people will just do a calf stretch and it's just they're bringing their toes up. That's relatively useless because you've got to be weight bearing and you've got to do it in all three planes of motion. And I teach this for free. I've got a program where it's free. My YouTube channel, it's free. So you can learn how to do all three planes of motion, but make sure those ankles are working properly. And then make sure your hips are working properly. We do a lot of sitting. And this isn't age related, it's activity related. But if you've been sitting for 30 years, your front hips are going to be kind of locked short. They're going to pull on your low back when you try to stand up. And you're going to think
Mm.
you got a back problem. You don't have a back problem. You got a front hip problem. And also, the back hip is the power source, gluteus maximus. I call him Max. Max shrinks, he weakens, he loses ability. If you've got what I lovingly call a pancake butt, you really don't have power in
Yeah.
Max. And
Yeah.
you need Max for everything. So if you go to sit and you're plopping those last couple of inches, you've lost power in Max. If you
Mm.
kind of struggle to get out of a car or you struggle to go upstairs, you've lost power in Max. And if you have pain going downstairs, you've lost range in your ankles. A lot of people have knee pain going downstairs, but it's because they've lost that range in their ankles. And then, of course, the trunk, as I already talked about. So if you pay attention to those three body parts, which I teach a lot on my YouTube channel, or you could go to the Gray Institute if you want to take some professional coursework, but addressing those three areas could make you feel 20 years younger.
And that, don't we all want that?
Hmm.
Eileen, yes, you've touched on a few things there that I find super interesting. Thanks for that free information stuff. I will make sure that I put links in the show notes so people can go there. And the other thing that you've mentioned several times there is the ankle. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because just in the last podcast that I've recorded, I spoke about foot core exercises. And part of that is ankle mobility. And I
Yes.
found that so super beneficial in helping me to run faster, because the foot is the first thing that absorbs the shock, and it
Yes.
transfers right the way throughout the body.
Yes.
So I'm super pleased you mentioned that.
Yes, yes. Oh, I'm so glad that you did that. People need to know.
Yes.
Absolutely. I do a video of everything that has to happen from the time you land on your heel before you push off your toe. And it has to go all the way up to the neck and all the way back down with every step we take. And if
Yes.
you run, you're either a heel strike runner or you're a forefoot runner, but that foot has to be functioning properly. Absolutely.
Mm. So this is where it gets interesting for a lot of listeners. How does nutrition contribute to chronic pain?
Mm. So this is where we, tip over some sacred cows, or we kind of stir the waters a little bit. When it comes to food, there are so many conflicting opinions. People
Mm.
have, I remember reading somewhere a survey was done, and people said that knowing how to eat healthy was more challenging than doing their taxes. So we've made it that way. And that's
Mm.
because of, everybody wants to publish their opinion. Now, I'm not disrespecting anybody who shares their opinion. We've all got a
Mm.
right to do that. It's free speech.
Yes.
The issue is, where is the information coming from? And what I tell people, the most important question to ask when somebody gives you advice, or even if you read a book, how many people has that person helped with this information, and how long have they been doing that?
Mm.
That's key, because it could be a bestseller written by an MD, but they're not practicing medicine. So they haven't actually applied their theories to anybody, and they can't tell you what they've seen or observed in their patient population from this information.
Right.
So it's really important that we ask that question. And what I tell people is, I have a diploma in nutrition education, and the coursework that I took, it was a 900-hour program. And it was taught by the Wellness Forum Institute, which is non-industry funded. So completely unbiased, no conflict of interest, and completely data-driven. So the things that I learned were based on factual science and how it impacts the human body and what's been seen over decades of clinical studies. So we're not talking, right now everybody wants to know about peptides. Everybody wants to know about, there's always some magic buzzword that's out there, and everybody gloms onto it and wants to make this, this magic change in their body with this one thing. What the people that I studied under that have been treating patients, working with consults, have been doing it for 40 years or more, and their track record is stellar. The people they work with have literally eliminated the need for medications 90% of the time or more, and reversed disease and eliminated chronic pain. So I want to preface what I'm going to say about how food impacts pain, because I want people to understand where I'm coming from on this.
Mm.
I have seen people eliminate chronic pain by following these strategies, these guidelines. I've had people in their 80s who had joint pain for years tell me that when they followed what they called my regimen, because they were from Denmark, that they had no joint pain. I've had people who've taken, I do a 4-week class on Nourish Away Pain, and I've had people come in at the second class 1 week later and say they couldn't believe how much better they felt and how much less pain they had.
Wow.
So, and I've observed this for decades. And as I said, those professionals I studied under have succeeded for 30, 40 plus years. So
Mm.
the track record, I think, speaks for itself. So here's what I have learned.
Right.
There are certain foods that promote inflammation in the body. The Stanford University School of Medicine did a very well done study looking at the cause of joint damage. And what they found was it had nothing to do with wear and tear, age, gravity, compression. It was chronic inflammation.
Wow.
So doesn't it behoove us to figure out, okay, well, what's causing chronic inflammation?
Mm.
Kind of important to know that.
Yeah.
And we know through decades of studies, and I dove into the data for 8 months creating a pain and obesity course for a specific organization. So I spent a lot of time in the data. Chronic inflammation is directly related to food intake. And the foods that are known on a cellular level to promote inflammation are foods that are high in something called arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid, it's essential. You need to get it, but you can convert it from plants. The oils in plants can be converted to arachidonic acid. But if you're consuming a lot of animal foods, you're getting the arachidonic acid directly. So, and I'm not telling people because they get all nervous. Oh my gosh, she wants me to be a vegan. I'm not using the V word. What
Right.
I'm saying is the more animal foods you consume, the more arachidonic acid you are putting in your body. And it's like putting a brick on the gas pedal of your inflammatory process. And so a lot of people are consuming animal foods 3 times a day, 7 days a week. If you reduce that to maybe 2 or 3 times a week, you might see a massive change in how you feel. And so that's important to know. There's another thing that promotes the inflammatory process, and that's excess weight. Now, fat cells, we used to think many, many years ago that if you just stared at one in the microscope, it just stared back at you. It did nothing, just laid there, And a muscle cell is kind of like the 4th of July, all kinds of stuff happening. Well, now we know a fat cell is a chemical producing factory. And it literally increases the inflammatory chemicals and cytokines in the body. So that's why when someone's carrying excess weight, they tend to have more chronic widespread pain, more joint pain. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's because they're carrying excess weight. So it's the excess compression, it's the gravity, it's the stress on the joints. That's not accurate. It's the fat cells promoting the inflammatory chemicals. Now, the best part is I've seen people carrying excess weight when they change their diet and they reduce animal food intake and they make some other strategic changes. They see their pain diminish markedly and they haven't had time to lose weight yet. So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 biggest pieces that I've seen. Yeah.
So you've mentioned animal based foods. Are there any other common eating patterns you constantly see linked to inflation and discomfort?
Yeah, it's, I don't tend to talk a lot about sugar, but sugar can promote inflammation. When you look at history of sugar intake, 50 years ago, people might have consumed 5 pounds of sugar in a year. Now you got people consuming it in like a week. So it's not, the World Health Organization says that a female can consume up to 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day with no adverse effects. A male up to 9. Well, a simple can of soda has 12 teaspoons of sugar. So now you've just overdone what you should have in a day. So it doesn't mean you can't put 1 teaspoon of brown sugar on your oatmeal. But the goal is, keep under that limit. And very few people are doing that. And so that can definitely wreak havoc. Also, a lot of people are not drinking enough water. They're not hydrated. They're dehydrated. And that whole age-related lean muscle loss thing, we could get into that in a moment if you'd like. But a lot of the times people say that they can't build muscle. It's because they're dehydrated. Muscles are 78% water. So if you're not drinking enough water, your body's going to struggle to build muscle. Of course, you also need to be doing the work, and most people aren't doing enough work to create the muscle. But, there's that. And then, of course, enough calories. So they've got the energy to do the hard work. So there are some other things involved. But hydration also is key. If your muscles are not getting enough fluid, if you're dehydrated, they're going to spasm. They're going to complain. You could have muscle spasms simply because you haven't drank enough water for the day.
That's very interesting. Um, Arthritis. I've been diagnosed with arthritis, and there's this story out there that says nightshades, avoid nightshade plants. How
Mm.
true is that? And do you have any information on that?
Yeah, I have looked into that, and some people are considered sensitive to them, but there's also it's kind of inconsistent, the data. I had a really good friend who was in her 90s who swore she couldn't eat tomatoes. And I suggested some strategy changes for her. One of them was she was dehydrated, so she drank more water. A couple of other things she did. And she said, I can eat tomatoes now and they don't bother me. So, sometimes I think we blame a food when
Yes.
it might not really be that specific plant, it might be
Mm,
something else.
right. So, what's one simple nutrition shift that could make a noticeable difference within weeks?
Mm. I always tell people because we have this fear of lack. So when you tell people to stop something, they tend to get very upset, even though I did say if we can reduce the animal food intake. And animal foods are anything with a face or a mother, even if it swims. So, people have to remember that. Salmon is an animal food, egg is an animal food, dairy is an animal food. So, that's key. Um, oh, and dairy is also very well known for causing joint pain and a lot of other things as well. So, but getting back to your question, and now I got thinking about the dairy, so I completely forgot. Can you repeat your question? I completely forgot where I was.
What's the one noticeable difference that people can experience by making a shift in their nutrition
Yes.
intake?
Yes, yes, thank you. So adding something. One of the most important things for people to understand is greens. Now, I know some people say, well, I don't, because they hear the V word and then they think, oh, I'm going to have to live on my backyard grass. You know, that's not true. You can live your whole life without eating a salad and be okay if you follow a lot of good strategies. But people need to know this. There's something called nitric oxide that the cells that line all your blood vessels create. And it keeps those blood vessels open and wide and gives you very healthy circulation. What's been found, and I've heard this from many experts, uh, including Caldwell Esselstyn, who wrote a beautiful book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And he's worked with people who were supposed to die in a year, and 23 years later, they're still going strong. So, but what has been seen is dark leafy greens and balsamic vinegar have this beautiful effect of improving your nitric oxide production. So just adding that once a day, you might notice you feel better because you're getting better blood supply to every cell in the body.
Wow. You have spoken about how some medications actually contribute to pain and mobility loss. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, well, that would be another couple of hours if I really unpacked it, but I've got a chapter on that in one of my books. And a lot of the times people are taking medications that create pain and they don't know it. Statins are one of them. Statins are very well known for causing leg pain, joint pain, rhabdomyolysis, which is a very serious issue with muscles. And then there are, some cardiac meds, some mental health meds. There's so many different medications that can literally cause pain in the body. And so now you're trying to eradicate the pain and you're trying to do all these things, but you're chasing your tail because the medication is the cause. So it's always important to understand if your medications have a pain side effect potential. A lot of them, it's called arthralgia, which is joint pain, myalgia, which is muscle pain. And so if they see those side effects, then have a talk with your prescribing practitioner and see if there's an alternative. A lot of the times when you instill the right strategies in your life, you might kind of eliminate the need for the medication.
Mm,
Don't anybody stop taking a medication without
mm,
talking to your practitioner. But wouldn't it be nice if you didn't need the medication because you made other changes that addressed the reason for the medication
mm,
in the first place? Because
mm,
you're just medically manipulating those blood biomarkers. You're
mm.
not necessarily reducing your risk of having an event. And a lot of people think they are. But when you look at the real numbers in the data, medications don't necessarily reduce your risk by very much.
Right.
What does reduce your risk by a lot is the dietary changes, the lifestyle changes. Those are seen to have a radical change in your risk.
Hmm. How can people start having more empowered conversations with their doctors?
I think a lot of what happens is people tend to think that they just have to say yes to their doctor no matter what's recommended, and they don't even know that they can ask questions. And a lot of people, they're intimidated. They're like, you're the medical expert. I don't know anything. I didn't go to med school. Who am I to say anything? And it's funny because people will spend more time researching their vacation plans than they will their health issues. And obviously, if you go
Yes.
on the internet and you research health issues, you're going to be completely like a deer in headlights if you don't know anything about the medical world. So, an important question to ask that anybody can ask, it doesn't matter what your background or your knowledge is okay, you're recommending this medication, procedure, surgery. What are the benefits that I will get from this? And what are the risks I can face with this?
Mm.
And now you've got a pros and cons list. And then you can make an informed decision instead of a ignorant decision. Because I can't tell you how many people I've seen in a clinic setting or private consulting setting where they said, boy, I wish I knew then what I know now, because I would have
Mm.
never agreed to that, because they're
Mm.
still dealing with some really nasty fallout, sometimes years later. So it's important to be informed. And it's a
Mm.
simple question. What are
Mm.
my benefits? What are my risks?
That's such a good piece of advice. You've seen people in their 70s and beyond regain strength and confidence. What makes that possible?
The fact that the human body never loses its ability to improve, a muscle will increase in strength no matter your age, as long as you're above ground. Bones will increase in density no matter your age, as long as you don't have some debilitating disease that, will stop that from happening. But I've seen people, I have had people over 100 years old getting stronger doing squats and parallel bars. I remember this one guy, he was in his 80s and he's sitting in the chair in the clinic, and his sweet wife was standing next to him saying, yeah, he used to do a lot of activity. He used to walk to the corner store every morning. He used to do all this stuff and he stopped doing it. And now he needs help. He needs me to help him get out of the chair. So the doctor sent him for PT. So I look down at him and he looks up at me and he says, don't you think at my age I should be allowed to rest? And I looked back and said, kind of tongue in cheek, well, if you want your wife to dust you off once a day. So he sort of went,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't an answer he was expecting.
Yeah,
But within just a couple of weeks, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know exactly if it was 2 or 3, but it was one of those numbers. He was leg pressing over 200 pounds and he could get out of the chair like a shot. And he was 86 years old. So,
that's
this thing that we've thought that, oh, I'm older, I can't get stronger. It's not true.
well, that was going to be my next question. What would you say to someone listening who feels it's too late for them?
It is never, never, never too late. Never. Did I say never?
What are three simple things listeners can start doing this week to move better and hurt less?
3 things. Okay. One of them is if you happen to be someone who spends a lot of time sitting, a very good thing is to consistently get up and move your hips so that you are loosening up, opening up the front of that hip, which might be yanking on your low back. So a real easy thing to do would be to maybe have the hips go back a little to kind of shorten and take the stress off the low back, and then ease the hips forward. That just doing that, 10, 15, 20 times regularly throughout the day can make a big difference. And then it doesn't hurt if you do a little bit of 3 planes. So now let's go a little sideways and let's go a little turning. Now, the most important thing is to not punch the bear in the nose, because if you're creating pain with the movement, your brain's going to try to protect you from you. It won't tell you it's doing that, and you're going to compensate. So you're going to be doing dysfunctional things and training in dysfunction instead of function. So if a movement hurts, don't do that movement. Do the opposite. And what happens is the body starts to create this beautiful fluid fill effect, this pumping action. And so now You realize, so say your hips didn't like going in one direction, but they were okay with the other, and you just do the direction they like for a while. Well, sometimes even within 10 repetitions, you'll notice, oh, now I can do the other side and it's not hurting anymore. It might take a couple days, it might take a week, but the body will restore the ability to do that motion more often than not. So don't hurt yourself, but do those nice 3-plane motions with your hips. You will see a big difference. Just do that regularly throughout the day when you're standing at the stove cooking or at the sink doing dishes. Do that movement. It's critical. And then a second thing that is critical is to make sure Max is working. If
Right.
you've been sitting on him and he's kind of been turned off for years, you've got to get him back to work. And so what I tell people is do what I call chair squats, where you got the chair behind you so you're safe. Hold on to the kitchen sink if you need to, but get that bottom back and down as low as you can go without causing pain. You might need to move your feet. It's okay. We're taught keep those feet perfectly hip width apart, toes pointed forward. Well, that's not how we live life. If you squat down to get something heavy out of under the kitchen sink, your feet could be in any position. You squat down quick to pick up a 2-year-old that's running at you, your feet could be in any position. So it's okay to move your feet. If you feel any knee pain or any kind of pain trying to do a squat, move your feet. Find a position where your body's okay with it. And do, 5, 6, 10 squats if you can. And do that several times throughout the day. I tell people if you're, set your phone to go off and remind you at least once an hour. Every 30 minutes is ideal. But just doing those 2 things can make a massive difference. And then the third is try to get around people who have rejected the narrative that you have to decline. And I'm going to kind of say this in a little bit of love, but we've just ruined everybody who listens to this podcast because now they know it's not true that they're supposed to decline. And so now everybody around them that talks about it, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. So try to find some people who have been enlightened like you have and
Yeah.
spend some time with them. It's going to help
right.
you to succeed. Studies show that when you're in a like-minded community, success is improved.
If someone only remembers one message from today's episode, what should it be?
That you're a whole person. You're a whole person. Whether you're struggling with mental health, emotional health, the brain, when people want to medicate you to change your brain chemistry, the brain has a body attached to it for a reason. I have a dear friend who's a phenomenal counselor, and she addresses them as a whole body. What are they eating? What are they doing? What's their physical activity? So just remember, you're a whole person. You're not a body part. You're not an organ. When my mom was in her last 12 days of life, she had experts looking at every organ in her body. Nobody saw her as a whole person. And so I had to kind of stand over her and make sure everybody, she's not just a kidney.
Yes.
She's not just a lung, and it's important because everything works together. We're a very complex system of parts and whole. And that term, the whole gestalt, more than the sum of your parts, that's us.
Eileen, you've written 2 best-selling books. What inspired you to write pain culprits and aging culprits?
Well, half the people who come to me want, excuse me, want to get out of pain. The other half of the people who come to me want to age without going to a nursing home. And so I knew that the mainstream narrative that we're fed is not accurate and it's not serving people. And so I've seen so much human misery over the 30 plus years I've been doing this that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I wasn't part of the solution. So I want people to know what's not mainstream, but should be.
All right. How can people use your books alongside their current exercise or rehab routines?
Mm. Well, the books don't teach specific exercises because you really can't learn exercise from the written word. When I teach a movement, I suggest lots of potential modifications based on the person's current status and ability. And it would be 3 pages of words to teach one movement. Nobody's going to read 3 pages of words.
Yeah.
So I have lots of videos. I have a YouTube channel. My books mention lots of resources, and many of them are free. Some of them are programs that there is a paid level, but there's also a free level. So I never want resources, financial resources to inhibit people from getting the help they need.
So how can people get in touch with you on those resources? Would you like to mention their names?
Yeah, any one of my websites has contact information, so they can email me. I would like to caution people that I answer every email I get. And a lot of the times people don't think I did because I was busy or I missed it, and it goes in their spam folder
All
and
right.
they think I didn't answer. So if you do email me, please look in your spam folder. I've saved emails that I didn't hear back from people and emailed them twice, 3 times. And finally they were like, oh, yes, I found it in my spam.
Yes.
So anyhow, so there's that. I think the best place if somebody is concerned about pain or aging or both, and they've got different things that really matter to them that are more specific, I have a main website that has a little 5 question quiz that takes less than 2 minutes to answer, and it will provide all the resources that I have on those concerns. And then they kind of know where to go, gives them a roadmap.
Right.
And that's the main website is havelifelongwellbeing.com because everybody wants to have lifelong well-being. So.
Thank you. Is there anything else on your heart that you'd like to share?
Just that I would love it if people who heard this and it resonated and they actually were like, yes, that makes such sense, which is what I hear a lot. I would love for you to share what you heard with as many people as possible who are willing to listen. Now, you can't push a rope. They might not want to know what you've got to say, but if they are interested, recommend my YouTube channel because that's very stressful for people to just go look at a video. They can see who I am, how I teach, and if they like it, they'll look for more. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eileen. This has been such an empowering conversation. What I love about your work is it replaces fear with understanding and shows us that aging doesn't have to mean shrinking our lives. If you want to learn more, check out Eileen's best-selling books, Pain Culprits and Aging Culprits, where she dives deeper into the movement and nutrition strategies we've talked about today. You can also find Eileen at havelifelongwellbeing.com. Just a quick reminder, what we've shared today is for education and inspiration, not personalized medical advice. Everybody's body is different, so please check in with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your movement, nutrition, or medications. As always, if you like this episode or if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who thinks pain is just part of getting older because it doesn't have to be. Eileen, thank you for being on Masters on the Move.
Thank you for having me.